This podcast is a production of Widener Law Commonwealth in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. For more information, visit commonwealthlaw.widener.edu/podcast.
Okay, we're going to get started. Hey guys, as many of you know, my name is Kimberly Diaz and I'm the president of the Latin American Law Students Association this year. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us, and I also want to thank Professor Stephen Ramirez for taking the time to join us despite the time difference and the distance. Just as a disclaimer, before we get started, this Zoom event will be recorded, and tonight we will be discussing issues that are of great importance surrounding the November election. So we want to make sure that we get the important message out as much as possible. So I'll turn it over to Professor Ramirez.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thanks for all your hard work in putting this together. And thanks to Widener Commonwealth School of Law for hosting this, and thanks to the LALSA students for sponsoring this event. I really appreciate it. And I think you're right, Kimberly. I think that we do have a rather momentous election ahead of us, and I think that there's a pretty stark choice, especially in issues that are of concern to Latina voters. And I highlight in particular the issues related to immigration because of the fact that whether those of us in the Latino community are or are not immigrants, many people assume that we're immigrants based on our appearance or our capabilities with respect to English, or who knows how else they determine who we are or what we are. You know, as far as I'm concerned, yes, I'm a Mexican American, but more than anything else, I'm an American. I was born in the United States, and my father was born in the United States. My mom was born in the United States. And so therefore, I've never considered myself anything other than American. And Mexican American to me was no different than Italian American, German American, Polish American. It was more about my ancestral background than anything else. So let's bring up the PowerPoint, and let's dig into the issues that I've spotlighted for discussion today. So there we go. The stakes of election 2024 for Latino voters. Again, I think I could go on and on about election 2024. I'm writing a book about it, and I've paid attention to the election very closely as a result. I've researched many issues in great detail. Much of my work you can find on the Corporate Justice blog, which Dean Cummings and I share and both contribute to. It's been a little bit dormant over the years, but I fired it up for purposes of election 2024, and I have a number of legal related posts up related to the election of 2024. So if you want to learn more, you can go to the Corporate Justice blog and take a look at a lot of my research. For purposes of this particular presentation, to me, the most pressing issue for those of us of Latina background is the issue of immigration, because this is an issue that, for better or worse, in the public mind, in the mind of many of our politicians, is closely associated with the Latino community. So in looking at immigration, I thought I would just take the words of our presidential candidates and let them sort of speak for themselves. But I'll give context and analysis and additional information on an as-needed basis. So I think the most important issue for the election is the mass deportation issue, followed by the birthright citizenship issue, and then the Harris-Walz alternative approach. So I'm going to be giving both sides approach to these key issues, and hopefully giving you enough information to either make up your own mind or become an informed voter and make up your mind. So those are the three issues that I'm going to cover in this PowerPoint. And I thought a good place to start would be the words of Donald Trump on the issue of mass deportations. And that is
Tom Homan, central casting. He's central casting. Under my leadership, we will use all necessary state, local, federal, and military resources to carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. Other countries are emptying out their prisons, insane asylums, and mental institutions, and sending all of their problems right into their dumping ground, the USA. Think of it. They're emptying out their prisons, and you've heard me say that, but they're also emptying out their mental institutions. And to use a strong couple of words, insane asylum. Insane asylum, that's where, anybody see Silence of the Lamb? That's where they come from, insane asylum. That's a stronger word than a mental institution. And they're putting them into our country. Thank you very much. I will ask every state and federal agency to identify every known or suspected gang member in America, and every one of them that is here illegally, and the towns know who they are. The towns and cities or the police. We love our police. The police know who they are. And we will pick them up, and we will throw them out of our country, and there will be no questions asked.
So that's the essential promise.
And Tom Homan, central casting. Central casting.
I searched pretty hard to get the most authentic sort of snippet that I could get. This was Donald Trump speaking to the CPAC, which is a conservative organization that holds an annual convention. And he's introducing, it's shortly before the campaign started, and he's introducing this idea of mass deportations. In other arenas, at other campaign events and other rallies, he invokes Dwight Eisenhower's mass deportation, which is a shadow of what he proposes now, what Donald Trump proposes now. But the model is Operation Wetback of 1954. Please forgive the slur, but that is in fact what it was called by the Eisenhower administration. And so Donald Trump talks about the Eisenhower administration mass deportation as a model to follow today. Well, the problem with following that 1954 model is that that was a zero due process model. They did not have hearings. There were no deportation proceedings. It was militarized. And essentially what they did is they rounded up people who look like me. No other way to put it, who look like me and my brothers and my mom and dad and my sister and all of my nieces and nephews. And they were frequently dealing with citizens who were unable to prove their citizenship on the spot. They gave people very little opportunity to respond to the demand to produce documentation to show that they had legal status in the United States. They seemed far more concerned with implementing a terror campaign to encourage people to self-deport and to deter people from coming to the United States in the first instance than they were with the status of the people who were being rounded up. So Dean Kevin Johnson, who is one of the leading legal scholars in the academy today, has an article in the UCLA Law Review that if anyone wants, I'd be happy to provide it to them. And he called it basically ethnic cleansing in the Southwest United States against Mexican Americans and people who looked like Mexican Americans. It wasn't about what documentation you may have had back in your residence to prove you were legal or to prove that you were a citizen. It was about what you looked like, and with no due process, right? who among us is able to always prove their citizenship? I've been recommending to my nieces and nephews and my daughters that they get uh, passport cards because it fits in your wallet. You don't have to worry about losing your passport. And that presumably should work to prove that you are a citizen of the United States if you're confronted by a military representative involved in this roundup initiative that Donald Trump promises he's going to pursue. So the problem with comparing it to Operation, the 1954 operation, is that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are targeting 20 million people for Roundup. Now, nobody knows the exact number of undocumented workers in the United States, but we're talking about 20 million workers for sure, because most of these people do have jobs and they are paying into the tax system and the Social Security system, even though they're undocumented, because if you get a job, your employer is going to withhold income tax and Social Security and Medicare. And so what we're talking about is a major disruption to the economy. But more than that, when you use the military for an operation that they fundamentally are not trained to undertake, I mean, I would be pleased to see many of the people in this room end up as immigration judges in a lawful due process proceeding to determine whether a person does or does not belong in the United States. But your average military person is not trained for that. They have no legal training. They don't understand the rules of evidence. They don't understand the crucial importance of cross-examination. They don't understand notice of charges and opportunity to be heard. These are legal concepts, not military concepts. And so it's hard for me to imagine how you're going to do 20 million roundups in a militarized operation without uh, harming a lot of citizens, harming a lot of people who are here legally. And of course, family separations are going to occur. Why are family separations going to occur? Because they're not going to necessarily be knocking on doors at home. They're going to be going to workplaces. They're going to be going to schools. They're going to be going to universities. They're going to go to places where people gather. And they're not going to ask, look, do you have a family or do you not have a family? Do you want us to notify your family? That's not what happened in 1954. And that's not what we're talking about when Donald Trump says that no questions will be asked and we're going to round them up and we're going to remove them. That's just, the military is not trained for due process. They're not trained to reach out to families. They're not trained to keep families together. And, the thing about family separations is Donald Trump did family separations in his first term. They were sued. The court found that the family separations were illegal and ordered the United States government to reunify families. Now, here we are, almost 4 years into the Biden administration, 4 full years into the Biden administration, and there are still 1,100 children who have been separated from their families and not returned. So think about that pain. Think about a child who's ripped from the arms of their mother or their father and separated and never returned back. This to me is the kind of horrific suffering that really motivates me as a law professor to want to get the word out about what's going on with these mass deportations that Donald Trump continually promises. With respect to detention camps, there's an interview on ABC News with J.D. Vance. It's on my corporate justice blog entry on these mass deportations, where he says, yeah, we're going to have detention camps. There's going to be camps where at any given time, 50, 60, 70,000 American workers are going to be concentrated pending deportation until we find a country that we can remove them to. So I think that the idea here is that these camps are going to be privately run prisons with de minimis assurances of non-cruel and non-unusual punishment, because there's going to be very little political incentive for anyone to pay attention to how well the camps are run. We know that in the operation of 1954, historians have compared the treatment of those rounded up to the conditions on a slave ship. We know that people died in transit. We know people died of thirst and starvation once they were dropped off. I have no reason to believe that these detention camps are going to be in any way comfortable or in any way humane. Given what we've seen from the Trump administration in their first term, I think we can rest assured that they're going to be very unpleasant places to be and that they are going to cause us to question how this could happen in America. JD Vance also said recently that this roundup procedure, this operation that they have in mind for 20 million people in our country, that it will apply to legal immigrants as well as illegal immigrants. And he used as an example the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, who are not illegal immigrants. They are here on an asylum claim that is being adjudicated. And what happened in Haiti is there was an ex post facto stripping of citizenship. We'll get to that in a minute. And many Haitians fled the Dominican Republic for the United States and were given the opportunity to show their claim for asylum under international law was valid. And yet, JD Vance says that the Biden administration cannot, as a wave of the wand, turn an illegal immigrant legal. That's how he put it. So it's unclear to me exactly what migrants are going to be deemed legal and what migrants are going to be deemed illegal. But as I said, there's no question here that United States citizens will be ensnared. I mean, that's what happened in Operation Wetback. It was citizens who were unable to prove their citizenship on the spot to a military authority. It's citizens who were young children born in the United States who were just assumed to be illegal immigrants like their parents or undocumented immigrants like their parents. And so I think citizenship is something that, in and of itself, is going to be destabilized if Trump wins the election. We'll get to that issue next. Um, the other thing that's very disturbing to me as a law professor who has studied how the law can be used as an instrument of oppression as well as an instrument of justice um, is all of the big lies that we see to dehumanize and demonize migrants. I had a family of immigrants when I was growing up. My grandfather, my grandmother, my grandfather, my grandmother, my uncles and aunts, many of them were not born in the United States. Um, and it's hard for me to sit still and understand why we need to refer to these people as animals or why we need to say without any shred of evidence that they're coming from insane asylums, mental institutions, and prisons. Um, it is, or that they're eating pets, right? I think it's an effort to pave the way for some really brutal and inhumane treatment. And that's kind of the point of this kind of an operation. It's not just that we're going to try to get 20 million people who are undocumented out of the country. We're going to try to get 20 million people out of the country in a way that is brutal and inhumane so that we deter others from trying to come to the United States. So this promise, it appears in virtually every rally of Donald Trump. It appears it was you saw it at the GOP convention where they had signs, mass deportations, mass deportations. It's in Agenda 47, which is the platform for the Trump campaign that's up on the web, and it's in the GOP platform. It's in the Republican platform. So this is something that the entire Republican Party is behind and supports. And I think that when you think it through and you understand the parameters of what they're talking about, it should really horrify anyone in favor of liberty, freedom, and human dignity, because this is the opposite of that. And it's almost Kafkaesque because it's not just undocumented migrants who can get caught up in this. It's Haitians who are pending asylum adjudications. It's people who may be here on a green card. It's people who have citizenship but can't prove it on the spot. It's people who maybe have birthright citizenship and who can't prove that their birthright citizenship is legitimate. So that's the segue, right, to the next topic. That's the abolition of birthright citizenship, which is the idea that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, period. And that's the next topic.
Joe Biden has launched an illegal foreign invasion of our country, allowing a record number of illegal aliens to storm across our borders. From all over the world they came. Under Biden's current policies, even though these millions of illegal border crossers have entered the country unlawfully, all of their future children will become automatic U.S. citizens. Can you imagine? They'll be eligible for welfare, taxpayer-funded health care, the right to vote, chain migration, and countless other government benefits, many of which will also profit the illegal alien parents. This policy is a reward for breaking the laws of the United States and is obviously a magnet helping draw the flood of illegals across our borders. They come by the millions and millions and millions. They come from mental institutions. They come from jails, prisoners, some of the toughest, meanest people you'll ever see. The United States is among the only countries in the world that says that even if neither parent is a citizen nor even lawfully in the country, their future children are automatic citizens the moment the parents trespass onto our soil. As has been laid out by many scholars, this current policy is based on a historical myth and a willful misinterpretation of the law by the open borders advocates. There aren't that many of them around. It's amazing. Who wants this? Who wants to have prisoners coming into our country? Who wants to have people who are very sick coming into our country? People from mental institutions coming into our country? And come they will. They're coming by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. As part of my plan to secure the border on day one of my new term in office, I will sign an executive order making clear to federal agencies that under the correct interpretation of the law, going forward, the future children of illegal aliens will not receive automatic U.S. citizenship. It's things like this that bring millions of people to our country, and they enter our country illegally. My policy will choke off a major incentive for continued illegal immigration, deter more migrants from coming, and encourage many of the aliens Joe Biden has unlawfully let into our country to go back to their home countries. They must go back. Nobody could afford this. Nobody could do this. And even morally, it's so wrong. My order will also end their unfair practice known as birth tourism, where hundreds of thousands of people from all over the planet squat in hotels for their last few weeks of pregnancy to illegitimately and illegally obtain U.S. citizenship for the child, often to later exploit chain migration to jump the line and get green cards for themselves and their family members. It's a practice that's so horrible and so egregious, but we let it go forward. At least one parent will have to be a citizen or a legal resident in order to qualify. We will secure our borders and we will restore our sovereignty starting on day one. Our country will be great again. Our country will be a country again. We'll have borders. We'll have proper education, and we'll put America first. Thank you.
So that's from the Trump website. And I wanted to, try to use as much as possible Donald Trump's own words to highlight the consequences of what he is suggesting. And I think that when you think about what he's saying here. Okay, so let's take stock of what we just heard. First of all, it's the 14th Amendment that guarantees and secures birthright citizenship. And Donald Trump is talking about changing the Constitution via an executive order. Of course, litigation will follow very quickly. Of course, it'll end up in the federal courts. Of course, it will end up in front of the Trump Supreme Court for final adjudication. And at that point, assuming that the Trump position prevails, and keep in mind that there's a whole string of Supreme Court cases that supports the plain meaning of the 14th Amendment. I urge you to look at the 14th Amendment with your own eyes and look at Clause 3. Clause 3 of the 14th Amendment could not be more clear that as long as you're born in the United States in a place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, then you are a citizen. You're a birthright citizen. But he wants to take that on by executive order on day one. It has huge implications for the mass deportations that we were talking about. Because if they reject birthright citizenship as part of the mass deportations, many citizens now will be rounded up, notwithstanding their citizenship status, because of the executive order that says the federal government will give no credence to birthright citizenship unless you can prove one parent was a citizen. So you can imagine how this greatly expands the pool of those who will be rounded up as part of the mass deportations. Worse yet, J.D. Vance, who obviously is Donald Trump's running mate, and is in line to be vice president should anything happen to Trump, to be president should anything happen to Trump. He co-sponsored a bill called the Constitutional Citizenship Clarification Bill. This can only be called the most radical abolition of birthright citizenship in history. And the reason is that the act affects everyone who claims birthright citizenship. Under the act, and this is a link, by the way, to pull the act up. Well, what I was going to show was the actual act that is hyperlinked to that page, and I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with anyone. But the act itself has no limitation on its redefinition of citizenship. It's called the Constitutional Citizenship Clarification Act. And what it does is it adopts a very obscure legal argument that suggests that they never intended birthright citizenship. But in fact, the Supreme Court has already held contrary to that repeatedly. And they make it so that there is the possibility, even the likelihood of retroactive application, meaning that even the birthright citizenship of myself would be questioned unless I can prove the citizenship of a parent. So if you want to get a passport, if you want to apply for some benefits, if you want to prove your citizenship in order to evade mass deportation, you better now not only have your passport card and your passport, but a copy of your parents' passport. In other words, every American who relies on birthright citizenship as their pathway to citizenship, which is the vast majority of us, that you need to now, after this J.D. Vance Act, prove not just your citizenship, but the citizenship of your parents. And you're going to have to do that on your own, because it's very hard to get documents from the federal government on citizenship of people who got their citizenship in decades past. So my recommendation is that you think very hard about getting a passport card now, and that you think very hard about getting a photocopy of your parents' passport, so that that way you can prove citizenship even to the exacting standards of the J.D. Vance Act, the Constitutional Citizen Clarification Act of 2024. This act is going to have the effect of throwing even more people into a destabilized situation in terms of their citizenship. A big chunk of the country is going to have to prove citizenship in a new way. I just went through renewing my passport this past year. I sent in my old passport, a copy of my driver's license, a copy of my birth certificate, and 8 weeks later, I got my passport and my passport card. Well, now, if Donald Trump and JD Vance win, when you go to apply for a passport in January of 2025, you're going to have to include all of that plus proof of your parents' citizenship to the degree necessary to satisfy a bureaucrat that your parent was, in fact, a citizen. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like. But for me, it is a file I have at home that has my mom and dad's birth certificate, my mom and dad's death certificate, and my mom and dad's passport uh, ready to go should I need to reprove my citizenship to maintain the validity of my passport or my passport card. But look at how much more difficult this has become. Look at how much more difficult a citizen has in terms of a pathway for just getting a passport. I don't understand why it is that this isn't getting more play, because to me, this is a major obstacle to anyone proving citizenship in the United States. It's not that there aren't people who will be able to meet the new requirements. It's that there are many people who, for reasons that have nothing to do with their legitimacy of status, won't be able to meet the burden of proof, right? It's easy to prove you're a citizen if it's birthright citizenship. You just go to the local county and the local municipality and you get yourself a birth certificate and you send it in to the State Department to get a passport and you're a citizen. That is the best proof of citizenship I know. This is going to turn all of that upside down. And starting in January, the State Department's going to be overwhelmed with people trying to prove citizenship and getting passports under the new test imposed by Donald Trump and JD Vance. So this is the Kamala Harris alternative. And
Vice
again,
President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
So I think what we have here is two very starkly different approaches to the problem of immigration and securing the southern border. On one hand, what we're going to see if Donald Trump and JD Vance prevail is we're going to see what Donald Trump himself calls a bloodbath of violence in rounding up 20 million American workers, separating many people from their families, ensnaring many innocent citizens while the courts figure out whether or not birthright citizenship in the 14th Amendment stands, or whether or not Donald Trump as president can unilaterally change it by executive order. We're going to see concentration camps of deportees. They're not going to be pretty pictures, I'll tell you that right now. People will die. That's why Donald Trump used the term bloodbath. And these are his own words. We'll see the destabilization for citizenship for anyone who claims birthright citizenship, including probably many people who are on this presentation right now, including myself. I rely on the fact that I was born in Evanston, Illinois. Um, and we'll see a lot of chaos and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And probably in the end, just like in his first term, the problem won't really be fixed because the United States of America is still the shining city on the hill to the rest of the world. And people are literally dying to get into our great country because of all of its promise and all of its opportunity. That is going to be one option. Another option is the Harris-Walz option. They are behind a bipartisan bill for the first material immigration reform act passed by Congress in 40 years. It enjoyed bipartisan drafting, bipartisan support, and President Biden had committed to signing it. It would have beefed up enforcement. It would have created new jobs for Americans in the form of immigration judges, immigration officials, immigration lawyers in the Southwest United States. It would have injected more due process, not less, more law, not less, less violence, and not the detention camp destabilization of citizenship approach of the Trump administration. So I think that what we're seeing is on this issue of immigration, which is something I think we Latinos and Latinas must pay attention to because you just never know who's going to get ensnared. Ourselves, our loved ones, our friends, people in our community. And it's hard for me to state a level of concern on what I'm trying to communicate here that is more urgent and a higher level of concern than what I'm trying to manifest. I cannot overstate the importance of this issue. And I think we have two radically different approaches. And I think the answer is get informed. And you can start with my corporate justice blog spots, blog posts on this. And I hyperlink. I hyperlink to law review articles. I hyperlink to precedent. I hyperlink to legislation and proposed legislation. So that's a great first step in getting informed. I also am very picky about my sources. I like to rely on the words of the candidates themselves, just like I did today in this PowerPoint presentation. Second up after the words of the candidates is their own campaign documentation and their own campaign websites. Then I use the most powerful sources, most reliable sources I can find. I rely heavily on the Wall Street Journal. I rely heavily on the BBC. I rely heavily on PBS. These are the most credible surveys out there, most credible sources out there by survey evidence. And then I think it's critically important that we all get involved. We all have to communicate to our communities the way that I'm trying to do with you here today, the importance of these issues, the importance of getting informed, and the importance of going to vote and getting everyone you know to vote. Um, Look, I'm not going to say who I'm voting for. It might be clear to you, it might not. I'm also not going to say who you should vote for. That's not the point of this. I'm convinced, as a believer in democracy, if we get everyone out there to vote, if we get the Latino community to go vote like never before, because never before have we seen more important issues than this, we're going to get the right answer here. And I have confidence in that. So with that, let me open it to questions and we can stop the share screen.
I had a question for you, Professor Ramirez. Let me turn on the light here so I'm not in the dark. But I was just curious about the birthright citizenship. I was wondering how that burden shifts if one parent is deceased.
So we don't really know the answer to that is the short answer. And the reason is because we don't know if the proposed legislation is going to pass or if we're just going to be relying on the text of an executive order that hasn't been signed yet. I think one of the problems we have in a democracy, and this is not a partisan statement, this is a statement of fact, is that every 4 years we get a performative election that may or may not track what those candidates are going to do once they get in power. Every 2 years for the House, every 6 years for the Senate, every 4 years for the White House. So it's hard to say how this is all going to play out. If the Republicans control the Senate, the House, and the White House, I believe they will work very hard to get the J.D. Vance Constitutional Citizenship Clarification Act enacted. I believe they're very serious about this. You see it in Project 2025. You see it in the GOP platform. And of course, the selection of J.D. Vance as a co-sponsor of that legislation is in and of itself significant. So I think the GOP is pretty seriously behind that act. And I think the way that act is going to work is that suppose I go to apply for a new passport in light of the new definition of citizenship, and I submit the documents they request. They turn me down and they say, we were unable to verify these documents. Therefore, your claim for birthright citizenship is rejected because you haven't been able to prove either one of your parents were citizens. And mind you, it could end up that you have to prove both of them were citizens. But as it stands now, it's either one, okay, in the act. That's what it says. So what do I do? Well, I would have to sue the State Department in order to get my new passport. And the burden, I think, would be on me to show that they acted arbitrarily and capriciously or that they otherwise violated the law. And I would have to now affirmatively prove in court the citizenship of one or both parents. So I think that's how the burden of proof is going to play out. We don't know right now whether or not that act is finally signed into law. Would be a one parent act where as long as one parent has citizenship, your birthright citizenship claim is vindicated, or a two parent approach. Um, right now, I'm the thing that strikes me more than anything else about the efforts of the Republican Party on this front, and particularly this new legislation that was introduced June 5th of 2024, is that it seems to be ever more exclusionary. Every step we go down this path, the proposals of the Republican Party seem to be more exclusionary. So if that's any clue, maybe after the election, we see a bill being introduced to compete with the J.D. Vance bill that requires that you prove both of your parents were citizens in order to be entitled to birthright citizenship. That's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. So does that just create a whole new pool of fears for you if there's that extra burden to prove then if both of your parents had the birthright citizenship? Like, I understand they're both equally scary. They're both scary in different ways, but do you think it's just a totally different ball game to say, no, you have to prove both of your parents give you the birthright citizenship?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, I've been really my parents each passed recently, and I was the executor of both estates. So I have this stuff ready to go. I just happen to have it because I've gone through all their important papers and winnowed it down. So I happen to have it, and I will digitize it and make it available to my family. But I fear that in a lot of households, it's going to be very, very difficult to prove the citizenship of people who are no longer around, and people whose own citizenship claim might be called into question. Can they prove the citizenship of their parents? I don't know where the Republican Party is going with this. To me, it seems to be a historic power grab by the government. They're proposing a historic power grab by the government at the expense of every single citizen who's claiming birthright citizenship. And to me, that's mind-bogglingly stupid. I'm sorry, maybe I should not have put it that way. Mind-bogglingly lawless.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Professor Ramirez, it's Dean Cummings. Thank
Hello,
you so
Dean
much.
Cummings.
Thank you so much for being here with us this evening for your super compelling presentation. How realistic do you think it is, Professor Ramirez, that a Trump-Vance administration would weaponize the ICE and the Border Patrol and start like literally gathering up human beings? It seems incomprehensible to me that they would like literally start arresting, gathering, asking questions later. I'm just curious as to how you think that would practically work if indeed they were able to gain office.
So it's a great question. And anytime you're talking about trying to predict the future, especially in politics and politicians, it's very hard to answer the question. First, I think that as a voter, I take each side at their word. They put all their chips on this. They have doubled down and doubled down and doubled down, and they are big on this mass deportation thing, and also on birthright citizenship. So I have to assume that a vote for Donald Trump and JD Vance is a vote for those proposals, because more than any other proposal they've made, it is a central feature and plank in their campaign for the White House. So that's first. Second, I suppose it's possible that this is all just politics and they're not really serious about it, and it's not really going to happen. It's just red meat for the base, that you sort of like spout these things out in order to rile up your supporters and get them behind you. I suppose that's possible. But look, if that's what they're trying to do, let's make them pay at the polls so that no subsequent politician goes down this road. Let's make this a third rail. Let's say, no, we're not going to stand by and supinely allow you to compromise our citizenship. We're not going to stand by and allow you to destabilize our claims to citizenship. That is a red line. Don't even go there. So let's even assume that they're willing to just lie through their teeth at every campaign rally, at their convention, when they write the platform, and when they go on TV and they debate and they do all the things that you do in a campaign to tell people what you want. It's all lies, right, Dean Cummings? Well, you know what? Let's make it so politicians don't even dare to lie about it.
That's good. Thanks.
Okay, so I see that it's 5:28, unless anyone has any final questions, I want to make sure that I thank Dean Cummings for inviting me to this outstanding law school, that I thank the Widener Commonwealth School of Law, and that I thank Kimberly one more time and the LALSA students. I see there's another question. Haley?
Sorry, I was just clapping for everybody, but I mean, I had just kind of a general question that I was curious to hear your opinion on is just, I'm struggling to see any reason why this intense, this whole mass deportation route, what the source of that would be, or why there's any reason they would be pushing so hard for this, any reason other than fear and hatred. So do you have any maybe reasons that it could be anything besides that? It's hard for me to wrap my head around any fact besides that. It just seems like Trump and Vance, that they just really hate immigrants, or they hate anybody not like them.
Yeah, I mean, there is the idea of white nationalism and Christian nationalism, and both of those closely associated ideas suggest that the United States really ought to be reserved for white Christians. And I don't think that when many Christians think about Christianity, that they're including in their concept of Christian many of the Catholic immigrants that we see coming up from South and Central America. So there, if you think about it, the kinds of demographic change that we've seen in the United States, it is almost predictable that there would be some degree of backlash. Derek Bell has spoken about this on many, many occasions. And if a group perceives that they're losing power, it's very hard to convince them otherwise. I happen to believe that all of this is socially constructed, that we're all human beings, that the United States is far stronger because of its diversity than otherwise. And that's why we dominate the world in technology and innovation, and our economy is the envy of the world. And everybody uses our technology, our iPhones, our computers, our artificial intelligence super chips. It's all American technology. So obviously diversity is not harming the United States as in terms of its ability to operate in a global economy, and as a nation state. Yet there clearly are those who may feel left behind by the structure of our economy, and that's another story for another day, who are feeling very threatened. And maybe the best way to approach that is by constantly hammering away at objective truths and facts and trying to stay away from invective, like I inadvertently did when I said stupid. I should not have used that word. I should have used the word lawless. I think it's important that we reach out to our co-citizens and reassure them that diversity is not as threatening as they think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's just sometimes it's hard to get that message across without seeming, I mean, I don't want to say self-serving, like as a Latina, that like, no, you should not be afraid of immigrants because look at me and or I mean, not me, but look at my mom, look at my family, you know, they're not scary, but it's just, it seems like it's more this abstract concept of like the immigrants, watch out for the immigrants in general, that scares people more than when actually you talk to people and you realize that they are just people the same as you and me.
Right. Well, thanks again, everybody. I really appreciated this, and I hope that you found this worthwhile.
Thank you so much, Professor Ramirez.
Widener University Commonwealth Law School is the Pennsylvania capital's only law school, with 3 specialized centers of legal scholarship through its Law and Government Institute, Environmental Law and Sustainability Center, and Business Advising Program. Widener Law Commonwealth offers an exceptional learning experience that is personal, practical, and professional. Visit commonwealthlaw.widener.edu for more information.